One of the things I often say here at A&M San Antonio is it's important that we leverage our geography and that we understand why we were created. So Senator Frank Madla had this vision to build a university in a community that had been historically an educational desert. As the university came up out of the ground and really established itself, we began to really recognize the communities that we served, particularly in South Bexar County, which was the senator's vision. There was a real thought to ensure that we were honoring the integrity of our community. So our architecture, our design, the way the buildings look, the feel that you have when you come up to A&M San Antonio is to understand the historical context of the Latino community, the Mexican American community, the Native American community, African American communities, all of the things that occurred in this space. We have always embraced cultural richness, and we have always embraced education from an affirmative lens. But we cannot be silent or neglect the impact that you can date back to redlining, and specifically all of the areas around where our campus was located were redlined. So when I came to understand that, it was a very deep and personal experience and an aha moment of what do we do now? Now that I know this and I understand it, how do we lead and guide and shape the future of all of our community, our faculty, our staff, and our students to understand the deep inequities that were built into the geography in which we live?
At the end of the Great Depression, during the Roosevelt administration, the banks were extremely wary of lending any money. The unemployment rate was so high and the inflation rates were so high. In order to encourage the banks to begin lending once again, the federal government comes up with this tool that we now call redlining. And it was a series of maps. And the maps were intended to indicate to the banks where high and low risk were in order to lend credit in the form of a mortgage. So risk at that point, in the 1930s, through the 1940s, through the 1950s, in American society was based on race. In those least risky neighborhoods, on maps they were coded green, and mortgages were available to those places at very low interest rates. In the most risky neighborhoods, which were non-white neighborhoods, they were coded red on maps, which is where the term redlining comes from. And in those neighborhoods, conventional mortgages were not available. So families, who in that case are non-white, were really forced into non-conventional credit markets in order to just survive.
For some reason or another, I just wanted to have my own home by the time I was 25. Going to a bank for additional loan was not even an option for me. I didn't even think about that. I was trying to figure out a way how I could do this without having to go through all the red tape, the process, and then at the end of the day being denied. So that didn't even enter my mind. I had to try to figure out a way to acquire a house without going through. And that was so unfortunate because I was producing income on a regular basis, had built up a good clientele, and my income tax would show that I was capable of paying a certain amount of money. But in many instances, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, you just almost knew that you were going to be disqualified.
In the United States, the vast majority of families that have built generational wealth have done it through real estate. When you don't have those opportunities, we just see this vast differentiation between those who were able to invest in real estate and those who are not. I think most people know about redlining as it was negatively impacting African Americans. But in fact, it did negatively impact other groups too. And so in San Antonio, we see that more clearly because San Antonio has such a large Mexican American population. in 1836. We see Tejano families, or people who are of Mexican descent living here in San Antonio, who had been of good standing in society, who had been, in some cases, local level elected officials. We see them lose their status almost overnight. For the people of Mexican descent who lived in the center of town, you start to see them moving a little bit west. And in fact, by the time we get to 1900, we essentially have two separate downtowns in San Antonio along racial lines. We have the Anglo downtown, which is east of the San Pedro Creek, and we have the Mexican downtown, which is west of the San Pedro Creek. In those two downtowns, you see two separate economies, essentially. And this happens all across the United States, where there's segregation. People who are not allowed to shop at the Anglo stores or the Anglo businesses, they have to create their own economies.
My great-grandfather's name is Don Miguel Menchaca, and he was an entrepreneur. He was a grocer. La Estrella grocery store was located here in the west side of San Antonio. Just a wonderful, wonderful man. Loved by his family, loved by his community. Also a social entrepreneur. He gave in service to his community. When you think about the impact of redlining on our family specifically, we could not sustain this legacy store. We could not sustain it because of the economic reasons around in this neighborhood, right? The socioeconomic situation and the reality of this neighborhood.
A lot of our neighborhoods were actually built during these times when credit was denied to significant parts of the population. We've always been a majority-minority city. And if we're denying credit to a majority of our population, then the neighborhoods that they live in are going to be substandard because they can't get access to credit. So our city was actually built under the regime of redlining. So in San Antonio, it's programmed right into the landscape. If you drive through some of our inner city neighborhoods, the houses are humble, the lots are small, the housing is small. We've got 1,000 square foot houses that will never be worth what houses are worth a little bit further out in more substantial neighborhoods.
Although redlining defunded and divested in certain communities, really based on segregation, there was also another plan implemented too as well. There's racial covenants that in specific deeds, communities of color just couldn't live in there. It was illegal. Because of that, we start seeing the development of the suburban community, inner city communities, where mainly communities of color live. It kind of breeds a system to where civil rights activists are saying like, hey, we're looking in some places that we see specific inequality in. Education is one of them.
Here in Texas and in other places, schools are funded based on the very local tax base. And so schools in poor neighborhoods continue to stay poor, and schools in wealthy neighborhoods continue to stay well-funded or wealthy. We see this ripple effect in the community. Again, it's not just about the real estate, it's also about what kind of other things do we have in the neighborhood, what is the quality of the public schools, what is the long-term mobility of this community. And so you see a lot of people who, if they have the opportunity, they're gonna go to a neighborhood with better schools, better grocery store, easy access to a doctor, things like that.
Bandera Road begins at Culebra, right near St. Mary's University. And the life expectancy in the neighborhoods right around there is 68 years old. If we take Bandera Road northwest, out of the city, about 10 or 11 miles, across 1604, the life expectancy is 88 years. That's a whole lifespan. Somebody grows up and grows old and sees their grandchildren and even may see their grandchildren grow up. And someone else at the other end of Bandera Road never even meets their grandchildren. And we have to ask why. A lot of it has roots back again in the beginning of the 20th century with a lot of housing policy that we haven't taken the time or the money or the willpower to address adequately.
The effects of redlining still have a negative effect in our community today. And San Antonio, we're better than this. We got to do better than that. We got to treat people as equal no matter what their color is.
I would say education is one of the best ways to try to break through this economic segregation. When you think about where Texas A&M San Antonio is located on what had been Tejano Ranch lands, just to see that trajectory, it's really exciting. Could our ancestors have ever known we would have a university like that here?
This university was not supposed to be here. People really fought and went out on limbs to get it specifically here on this side of town because it was very underserved. What it means to me to go to a university that has a passion behind people that are underserved is just that when you walk in a room, you don't have to go into your full story. When we're in class together, the conversation flows just a little bit better. Things are just a little bit more receptive. If students and faculty wanted to get more into the work, there are so many organizations that you can be involved in. It's built into the actual academic profile of your first year seminar class to have these conversations. So once you leave the class as a freshman, continue having the conversations, continue showing up, continue challenging things that you see, and just you be the change.
I hope that you find this experience educational and rewarding and add your own personal lens, your own scholarly lens to what it means to you in your classroom and how you interact with students, faculty, and in the community itself. And recognize how important and how proud our community is to have Texas A&M San Antonio here. I could live anywhere in the world, and I've chosen to live in Harlandale. I've chosen to live in the Harlandale district very close to our university because I want people to see the impact that our university is making in our community, and I invite you to do the same.